So we've downloaded and opened Billy Idol in Photoshop. We made 4 copies of the layer, and the first one we are calling Patch Tool. We grab the Patch Tool over here underneath the Spot Healing Brush Tool. It's that middle one. There's some options up at the top that are going to totally change how this tool works. So just notice, I'm going to start with Source selected. There's these 2 buttons that say Source and Destination. I'm going to start with Source. I'm going to drag around his eyeball, and I just want to see what happens. So when I drag around and end up back where I started and let go, it makes a selection. But then when my cursor is over the eyeball, it shows me an arrow. That means that it probably wants me to move that selection. Let's see what happens if I move it. If I move it to his forehead and let go, it fills in that area with his forehead skin. So it's going to kind of automate that itself. Now, some things at the top, again, that I want you to notice that'll affect the kind of job that it does here. If I undo that, where it says diffusion, this changes how much it blends that area with what's around it. So if I turn diffusion all the way down and I drag his eyeball and I let go, notice that if you look closely, the edges are pretty sharp. It hasn't done a whole lot of blending. However, if I turn the diffusion way up and I try that again, notice how much more softly it's blended the edges around that patch. So diffusion is one way that you can kind of have the computer do some extra work for you or leave your patch alone and copy it exactly. So diffusion's a big determining factor in how this works. There's another thing though. Remember we talked about source versus destination? If I switch to destination and I use that same selection and I drag, now instead of copying my selection to, or instead of filling my selection with what I've dragged it to, I'm going to be duplicating that selection onto the destination where I drag it. So when I drag and let go, it's going to put another eyeball in its place. Now again, diffusion still matters. Maybe I want it to blend that eyeball less when I copy it up here. So I'm going to turn diffusion down. It's giving me kind of like a lightened version of the eye a little bit because of the light on the forehead, but it's got a really sharp edge, which I don't like. So I'm going to turn the diffusion back up and try that one more time. So just right now, we're noticing the different results we get there. The edge is a little softer. So remember, with the patch tool, when we switch between source and destination, that determines whether it fills in the area that we've selected around, or if it is going to duplicate that area we've selected around onto somewhere else. Another big thing with the patch tool and a lot of these retouching tools is how big of an area you drag around the object you're trying to replace. So if let me show you real quick. I did a good enough job there getting a little bit of a border around the eye, so it filled it in pretty well. I notice a lot of people try and drag around just like the bare minimum, like they just try and drag this little tiny part of the eye and then they move it and they're like, oh, it doesn't look very good. Well, the computer's really trying, but like you gave it kind of a weird area in your selection. So make sure whatever you want it to replace, give it a little buffer around the edge so it has the full object you're trying to fill in, and it'll do a better job that way. So experiment around with the patch tool, try it on different parts of his face, try it with his mouth, change the diffusion, change it from source to destination, and just see what kind of results you can get. So filling in his mouth, pretty creepy. You also know enough to use the spot healing and the healing brush tools to fix up any little areas around where you move things to if they don't copy the way you want. All right, so I have gotten him at this point to have an eyeball on his forehead, to have 2 mouths. I switched which eye was where. He's got 2 left eyes. He's having quite a day. So that's what we can do with the patch tool. I'm going to hide that layer now, and we're going to move on to our next tool and see what results we can get from this next one. So I'm going to click the eyeball on my patch tool. I'm going to move it actually down underneath my next layer. And I'm going to name my next layer with content aware. What was it? Did I say it was? Content aware move. All right. So I'm renaming my next layer content aware move. And I've got my new, fresh, clean version of his face that I can destroy with these tools now. So content aware move is right below the patch tool. It looks like 2 arrows kind of switching places. I'm going to grab that tool and I like to use his eyes. We're going to just see what happens. I'm going to drag around his eye. It works just like the lasso tool, making a selection. And it's not letting me move anything. Does anybody know why? Beautiful. That's one of the first things to look for. Do you have a layer selected? This happens all the time. It's good to know what to look for, how to troubleshoot. So if something's not working, look and see if you have a layer selected. I did not. Now I do, and now it's going to let me grab that eyeball and move it. And when I move it, it's going to give me this little bounding box. That's just like transform. Control T. It's going to allow me to rotate, resize, do whatever I want. And then when I've got it the size, angle, and placement that I like, I'm going to hit enter. What this tool does is it's going to not only fill in the area that that object left behind, but it's going to blend your object now to wherever you moved it. So that has allowed me to move his eyeball up to his forehead and fill in the area that it left behind. Again, there are some options up top with this tool that allow you to mess around with the quality of the effects that you get to make them match the image. So there's two different modes. There's a move mode and an extend mode. I'll show you that in a second. There's also structure, which is similar to diffusion. That's how much it's going to blend with the area around it where you move it to. So always, test out the different results you get with structure. And then same with color. Color will also help match the color inside the area to the skin around it, and that sometimes you'll just need to experiment with. So I've moved and replaced his eyeballs from down here. I want to extend his nose, so he has a really long nose that goes up to between his eyes. So I'm going to switch the mode on my Content Aware tool to now extend, and I'm just going to see what happens if I select around this part of his nose. I'm going to move it up, and what I think this is going to do is not replace his nose, but it's just going to add kind of another part of this nose up above. So I'm going to hit enter after I get this the size I want. Okay, so it's extended his nose up here. I might have to do a little patching because it got a little wide. Maybe I want to do these two sides separately. Let me try that. Okay, so I'm adding his nose up top. Ooh, that looks gross, but hey. All right, I'm going to keep messing around with my nose job here. I'm going to just get that part, not that deep corner. So I did extend so that it's not replacing the nose. It's just adding on to it. I'm going to give him a couple more. I'll do this part again. All right, and each time when I've got something in the size and placement that I like, I'm hitting enter because that's going to apply that transformation. Bless you. I realize maybe the structure, I'm going to change that to see what kind of a job I get if I turn the structure down and then move it. Let's see. So a lot of this, folks, really is just about experimentation, seeing what kind of results you get. Yeah, it looks better for me when I turn the structure down. It does more blending around the area that I move it to. So that works better for me. I'm going to grab this and kind of put it back up where his eyeball is. All right. So I can always use other combinations of tools to get this looking a little better. And the tool we'll learn next lesson will be another good option for this. But experiment with this one using extend and move modes. Try out changing the structure and the color. See what kind of weird, bizarre things you can do to his face with this tool. It's a pretty powerful one. This is also a good tool to use if there's like a bird in the sky that you don't want, or you want to move it, or an airplane, or there's a photo bomber or something. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with this tool. This is just one iteration of it. Ooh, yikes. That did not turn out so well, that moving the mouse. Oh, because I have it on extend. That's why. Okay. Moving his mouth did not go so well. Let's try it with extend not on and see. Okay. As you can see, when I tried to move his tiny mouth, it kind of botched the skin here. So that might be where you want to come in. And again, use a combination of other tools to kind of fix up what's going on. This does not look so good. So I'm going to patch this area. I got to make sure to change it to source. I'm going to patch it with some of this skin to kind of have it blend in a little better. So again, just like some of our other things that we've learned, you can use combinations of tools to really fine tune what you want your image to look like. So now I've cleaned up underneath his mouth, looking a lot more realistic. Nice. Okay, so he's got a tiny mouth, a long, strange nose, itty bitty eyes on the top of his forehead. Look at this abomination. It's beautiful. I'm going to move on to our next one. So I'm going to hide that layer. I'm going to move my next blank layer up to the top to work with. And this one's going to be content aware fill. It'll be really quick. It's similar to the ones that we've learned, but I just want you to know it exists. Content aware fill. So this one's kind of like the patch tool set to source, but it's just a slightly different process that I want you to know about. So again, I'm going to select around something with a little bit of a buffer. I've done the eyeball. This is actually not a tool, it's a process. So I'm going to go up to the top where it says edit, fill. I'm going to look for content aware fill. And with that area selected, it's going to show me a little preview here of what that's going to look like to fill in that area. There are some options you can mess with that'll give you slightly different results. I don't honestly mess with these too much, but you can try them out. You'll also get to choose where it outputs that filled area to. And you can decide if it goes to a new layer, if it merges with the current layer, or what you want it to do. So once you've got all that stuff, you can click OK, and it'll go ahead and fill in that area. Again, similar to the patch tool. So that's something slightly different. This last one that I'm going to show you is perhaps my most favorite, and perhaps one of the most bizarre and most powerful ones. Question, Parker? What's up? It honestly worked different for me last class when I demoed it, so I don't know if there's something different in my settings, but sometimes you can go to fill and then content aware fill. You can change the contents to content aware, but it's like not it's not active for me, so I think I have to have a selection. Let's see, edit, fill, and then content aware fill. That last time looks like it went to a different mode. Let me see. Okay, so these take you in two different modes. I must have just like gotten confused from last class, so check it out. With a selection, I can either go to edit, fill, and then choose right here under contents, content aware, and click OK, and it kind of automatically does it for you. Or I can do edit, content aware fill right here, and that gives me this little like preview where I can mess with it and the edge and the stuff that it does. Ooh, interesting. Okay, so those are two different ways to do that. All right, so this last one of the weirdest ones, but I think you'll enjoy it. I'm going to need to make one more copy of my original. So I've got my new copy that I'm going to work with. I'm going to call this one Liquify. And I promise you, this is some of the stuff that Flora Borsi uses because she mentions it in that article. With my Liquify layer, a new copy of my original made called Liquify. That one's on top and visible. You don't need to make a selection. You just go up to Filter. And about halfway down under lens correction, you'll see Liquify. So it's a filter instead of a tool. These are all other filters that you can use. There's tons of cool options. You can experiment with these on the side, but we're going to try Liquify for now. Check it out. There's a bunch of options on the right, a bunch of tools on the left. There are more tools and options than I've been able to experiment with in my lifetime. They keep adding to this tool. I'm going to just show you a couple. Some things that really matter are your brush size. The density and pressure, those affect how far these pixels move, so check it out. I can grab and move pixels around with this tool, and again, if I change the size, that determines how much it moves, while the density and pressure determines how far it moves them. So he's got a huge, huge brain. I'm working on this right now. Next thing that we want to try, let me get this. Your brackets also work with this. You can use your left and right bracket to fill this in. He looks like Draco Malfoy to me right now. All right, so the next tool we're going to try, I'm going to do, I don't know, the Reconstruct Tool allows you to like, this one's kind of weird. I haven't gotten super familiar with it yet, but for some of the areas that I have retouched, it allows me to like rebuild them or reconstruct them. I can't quite explain it. The Smooth Tool seems to just like smooth out like textures. So that one, you know, if you've got some funky texture, maybe it'll help to minimize that. But the ones that I think are really interesting, there's a twirl clockwise. I don't know why there's not a twirl counterclockwise. I'm still trying to look for that. But twirl clockwise just twists his face in a clockwise motion. So depending on the size of your tool, you can do some pretty interesting results with that. So experiment with that clockwise one. The next one that you can experiment with is the pucker tool. That does just what it sounds like. It pinches things in from where your tool is. So how big your tool is and how long you hold it, it'll pinch in little parts of the image. So I can make his nose this like tiny little thing. The bloat tool does the opposite, where wherever you hold it down, it's going to bloat out the thing that you're holding it onto. So I can make his lips giant. Poor Billy Idol. He never agreed to this. I can make his eye bigger. Let's see. And what else can we do to this guy? Push left again. I don't know why there's not a push right, but there's a push left. It allows you to, again, just kind of like warp the pixels to the left. All right, so experiment with some of these. Experiment with the different settings you can get. When you like what you've done to this poor image, you can click OK, and it'll apply that Liquify filter to it. It might take some time if you've made a lot of changes. Also, just beware, don't use too big of a brush because your computer might get a little overwhelmed. It's a pretty heavy process. But now, folks, you can see that I've got all these vastly different results from our different retouching experiments. Quite a variety here. So once you've gotten a handle on those different tools, I'm going to show you your next step. Here are some of the other ones that I created with these different tools at like a different time for these demos. So again, you can get infinitely interesting, bizarre results out of these tools. But the next thing that we're going to do, let me pause the recording.